We're on? Yes, we're on. Welcome, everybody, to the pleasure panel.
Yes!
Let it out! Oh, I'm so glad you guys did that. That's wonderful. I'm Michelle Ernsting, and I'm the Director of Program Development for RNW Media, which runs the Love Matters program. And I am delighted to be here talking about pleasure with you today because it is so fundamental to family planning, sexuality, sexual health, and sexual rights. And it's taken a really long time to open a space for a conversation around pleasure at conferences like this. And that's kind of surprising because it's one of the main reasons why people say they or their partners choose to have sex and enter into relationships. So it's something we should be talking about. But it's clearly also really a taboo subject. And there's a lot of reasons why that is, and one of them is probably because people see pleasure as a driver of bad decision making. People make hasty decisions, and that leads to bad health outcomes, unwanted pregnancies, and disease. But today, we're here to reframe pleasure. Woo! And frame it as a driver of good decision making around sexual health and rights. And a lot of people say, why are you encouraging people to have sex? And that's not what a pleasure approach is. A pleasure approach is giving people the opportunity, the possibility to dream and act on happy, healthy relationships. Love, sex, and relationships, whatever the setting is that they are in. So Dr. Tlaleng Mofokeng, or Dr. T, I'm going to call her today, and that's her handle, from South Africa, clinician at Nalane for reproductive justice, country co-lead for Global Doctors for Choice, and member of the Global Advisory Board for Sexual Health and Well-Being. Next slide, please. Yes, Dr. T. So, and next, Dr. Pei Yuxin from China's Sun Yat-sen University. Her work involves using sexual pleasure as a means to promote erotic justice. And next, Lindsay Van Cleef, working in the Netherlands. She's the content strategist for the Global Love Matters program, digital communities engaging young people on love, sex, and relationships to help them make healthy decisions about their sexual health and rights. So, and last but certainly not least, Akiko Bonilla is an SRHR counselor with Mexico Vivo, an online moderator on Hablemos de Sexo, Love Matters Mexico. She uses pleasure as a gateway to talk about sexual health and rights as a way to set boundaries.
And I always make the analogy that, a lot of parents do look forward to taking their children to a driving school. Not necessarily because they have money to pay for a car for them or that they want them to drive the car and be an accident. That's not why you do it, right? But you do it because you want them to learn the rules of the road and the signs and how to be courteous for whenever they buy a car or you buy them a car or they drive a friend's car. And that's how we approach and how I approach, sexual health education, is to say you are giving young people information that's affirming of their rights. And you have to bring in people of sexual and gender minorities because even in literature still produced today, you don't have, that view. Everything is about cisgendered heteronormativity.
So masturbation project introduced me to the world of sexuality research. And I realized that actually people need an authority voice to give them legit permission, to have their own sexual life.
If you talk to a young person, they want to know how to kiss, how to make that person that they like them back, and what to do on a first date. These are the kind of topics that we need to engage in and really have serious conversations about, which can then lead to the more kind of family planning topics like when to use contraception, talking about safe sex and STDs, consent, and all sorts of other communication aspects that fall into these relationships. But by meeting them on these more fun, lighter topics, we can really engage and gain their trust.
I have seen that most of the young people don't dare to ask these questions in the consultation room or in the classrooms, and they feel more comfortable and they feel safer talking about these matters in the online space. So for me, it's been very interesting to learn how this phenomenon is helping us to build a bridge between the offline and the online world for young people's health.
And I find that especially even in individual therapy, where women come in with questions like, I know I could be having better sex, but what's the problem? And some people realize for the first time that they've never had consensual sex. And in some other ways, of course, especially online, you're going to get a lot of people who are asking and just feeling like, oh my gosh, I thought I was the only one going through this. And that has created an immense online community, especially of young black women, who are affirmed in their sexuality, in the expression of that sexuality.
And they go to our website, and then I meet them in the online space. I can see the difference. I can see that they feel, I don't know, like if they were talking to a friend, and they can share whatever their passions, desires, curiosities, questions, and doubts are, and they don't feel judged.
And maybe, Lindsay, maybe you can look at this more from a global approach in different settings when you're meeting young people. Is it a similar response they have, and what is that response?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of the same, right? Where initially people are a bit more hesitant. They're like, oh, that's not going to work. Maybe that works in those other contexts, but here it's more conservative, or we're a bit more quiet. But inevitably, it works every single time, and we see that by how quickly we can grow communities of youth around these subjects. And I think it goes back to what Dr. T was saying in terms of just normalizing this, right? Because so much of the sex education that they hear is about diseases, is about condoms, is about pregnancy, and it doesn't always validate their motivations and desires. And so by having these conversations, around kissing, around tips for what to do in bed, or where do you put your hands, and what do you do then? And those are the things that they're really curious about and they want to have normalized. So not just their body, but also how to interact with other people.
And so I think that part of what a sex positive movement looks like, for the millennials, for the young people coming, but going into the future, is taking into account the issue of cyber intelligence, because we know when things do go wrong around sexual health, sexual content for young people online, it can be really, really dramatic, and it can be life-altering. So I think it is important for them to know, how do I take a nude? Why must I not, forward a clip or a photo that I receive that has sexual content? And what is erotica? What is pornography? All of those questions start to come up. And again, I think in terms of cyberbullying, some of behaviors are normalized, and children are groomed early. So if you are not having the conversations with your children as a standard, you're not going to pick up that they're being groomed. They're not going to feel confident to come to you to say that someone said something inappropriate, or was that really inappropriate? I think so it has to happen within a context of just a general open communication with young people, so that even when they are feeling harassed and bullied, they can have someone they trust to tell them.
And so I always try to invite all the voices coming out into one platform. And I try to tell them sex is something, it's a lifestyle, but meanwhile, everyone can choose what he wants to do, because everyone's circumstance is so different. Yeah, even they are all young people, but their family background, their education, and their planning of their life are so different. So we cannot only advocate one certain lifestyle, but I need to tell them sexual pleasure is such a beautiful thing, and if you want to try, you just try it, and it's rewarding.
When female young people get involved into these pleasure topics, they empowered and they feel more like they own their own bodies, they own their own pleasure, and that's another gate to to set boundaries. They learn when to say yes, how to say no, when to say no. They learn what is violent and what is not, and not to judge themselves. And for male young people, for example, I think that's a relief. They think, they are always thinking they have to say yes to every girl or every whatever person they like. And when you say, it's okay if you say no, you don't have to be a sex machine, you're not a penis, you're a person, they feel relieved as well.
So now we're going to move on to a really important question, and that's about evidence, right? I think everybody wants evidence that there is a pleasure dividend, there's a return on your investment in this.
And where it used to be very difficult in the past to get, journalists and editors to cover stories with a sexual pleasure angle, whereas now I'm getting requests all the time for people saying, well, there's a day of, whatever day, health day, how do we link this to sexual health and sexual pleasure? When you see women that look like you, that sound like you, even if it's face-to-face or online, just saying thank you because for the first time I had an orgasm, and you're thinking, what? Really? Did we do that? And we do, and that's the most important thing for me. It's what individual women feel they can be empowered to do and what decisions they can be empowered to take for themselves.
Yushin.
Yeah, I do have numerous evident stories, but the most interesting phenomenon I noticed is that in China, since 1949, the establishment of People's Republic of China, gender equality becomes our basic national policy. And women easily get like equal rights to get employed and also in other aspects of our economical life. And for example, my audience mostly are women who get very well educated. And I noticed they feel like they never treated unfairly only because they are girls. That's also based on another social context, is that the one-child policy. Because most women in China who's in their 20s, 60s, 20s, 30s, and 40s are all the one child of their family. So the family actually put all their resources on this one child's education. And that's why women have ability to pursue their career and their dreams. However, when related to their sexual lives and sexuality, immediately you find women realize that they are not equal to men. So yeah, when I tell them, actually, sexual pleasure is a justice. Yeah, I tell them you deserve sexual pleasure, and no matter how kind of strategies you use, like you can find a lover, you can find a sex toy, and you can do whatever you like if you think you cannot negotiable with your husband. Yeah, if of course, first you go to marital counseling, and but if your husband refuses to do it, you can solve your own issue. You have this ability and you have this right.
It's just putting it in a much more positive light than when you frame consent around saying no, right? We all know that that's important, but it's also important to say yes and really be able to say that enthusiastic yes, like this is what I want, this is when I want it, and this is who I want it with. And so it's really, these are the same messaging, it's just in a slightly different way, but I think it lands in so much nicer when you frame it in a positive pleasure perspective as opposed to just being like, no, my body's not to be touched, my body's not to be seen, my body's not to be shared. And we would not be able to get and have the people stay for those conversations if we weren't also engaging. So they come for the pleasure and they stay for the education. And we see that across all the different communities and all the different cultures that the Love Matters website is active in. because it's really about what are people Googling on their phones, or what are they searching in Baidu in China, and how are they trying to get that information, because we're trying to make sure that they find evidence-based information and not just porn or other more tabloid kind of scandalous, conversations. We really want to make sure that things are based in reality and based in a pleasure and rights-based perspective so that they can, move forward in their relationships.
Mexican teenagers are like they don't think they have more options than to get pregnant and be a mother. So for me, in the consultation room and in the online room space, it's an opportunity to let them know that they have options, that they can negotiate contraception, and they can plan their maternity. They can ask themselves if they want to be mothers or if they don't want to have kids. That's important because they have the right to make that decision. And there's another subject that I want to put on the table, and that's the LGBT community. I think that in the online space, they feel so much safer, and I feel so much closer to them in that space. They can feel they are not alone. They can know they are not alone. They can ask whatever they want, and I think that's very, very important because every life matters, and everybody deserves the right to information, good quality information, and good quality health services, and we can talk about that in the online space because our culture, it's not like prepared to talk about it in public. So I think these are both important subjects in every country. But well, I see in Mexico these problems because we have like these religious things around, and that's a barrier.
Because that's not the problem with young people, I find. They have the information, kind of. Someone somewhere has told them something. But why are they still making the decisions to still not use condoms despite the information? And I think it's because we're not putting enough emphasis on service provision that is pleasure-centered. So the information is pleasure-centered, but the service itself, it's still not pleasure-centered.
When was the last orgasm you had? And there was this person that said, oh, I'm too old for that. No, if you're a human being, you're a sexual being. It doesn't matter how old are you. You have a body, you have a desires. So we should all talk about this in a different ways or however we feel comfortable, but we have to start these conversations.
There was a time that my attention was called by the government that, why are you teaching pleasure? I said, it's part of family planning. So how can we address that kind of issue if the authorities are prohibiting you from discussing these kind of sensitive matters? Because I believe if I'm going to discuss pleasure as part of my family planning method, there will be a higher increase of my CPR. Because every time I'm going to explain, like, hey, if you're going to use family planning, you can spend more time having sex, and you can reach your orgasm or something like that. So how can we lobby in the government if you want to really use pleasure as one of our an investment for family planning?
You kind of just have to get on with it and do it. Find people you can work with in the communities, grow your networks, build coalitions, because there's still so much more that you can do as a group, because at the moment you are taking personal cost, right, for a bigger pleasure justice movement. And I think the more you can have more people who are researchers, clinicians, policy makers, people who are in economics, they can make a different argument depending on whoever you're meeting in government. So that you can make an economical case for pleasure. We've made a justice case for it. You can make every single thing. And for us, I think even like when you're looking around societies that are heavily patriarchal, sometimes you may need a chief, you may need a princess in whatever society you work in, that person that the community listens to and trusts, and they can be your mouthpiece. We don't always have to be the face of the message constantly. Find allies and work through that way, and look at it as an advocacy sort of strategy.
My question is about access and equity, for example, about pleasure. So we know that the female condom is 15 times more expensive than the male condom. Mm-hmm. We know that women are made to pay a premium to have pleasure. Mm-hmm. So how do we ensure that we don't, in our discussions for pleasure, we don't feed into the very commodified discussion of women's pleasure?
It's important make people realize that sexual pleasure is a right. Because once it's a right, it needs to be budgeted for. People need to have access. But if it's still as a nice to have added extra, then people will be like, well, just pay out of your own pocket. But if you can link the issue of diabetes and neuropathy and the fact that vaginal dryness is a real problem, menopause, right, and vaginal atrophy, and then you can start to show that it's not just the fact that people have a right to be on treatment for chronic illnesses, but they have a right to have the side effects of those illnesses managed. And one of the ways is lube. So now lube just stops being just a luxury. It becomes a necessity of part of people's treatment.
I think that pleasure is so focused on genitalia, and our whole body, it's pleasurable, it's erotic, and I think that we should eroticize more the use of safe sex or the use of condoms or whatever. We have to work more on that.
So my question is, how are the males involved in your programs?
So the questions for me, it's not so much about, are you a man, are you a woman? I'm only speaking to women. It's about what type of sex are you having? Is it penis to anus, penis to vagina, vagina to vagina? And the advice you give is based on that, not because you are a man or you are a woman. It's based on the type of sex that you are having, and I found that's more affirming.
Yeah, I think it's an invitation for the male community to dare to talk about this and to what Dr. T was saying, to learn about what kind of sex they want to have and to know about all kinds of sex relationships. And maybe pleasure is not only, again, about intercourse. Maybe cuddling, it's pleasure. Maybe just, I don't know.
Dry humping.
Whatever. Having a great dinner and dirty talk, whatever. You can explore the I don't know, it's a diversity in the spectrum of pleasure.
And sorry, just to add on a little bit, I think also with just in general with society, men are praised for being macho and having sexual partners and being active, but women are shamed. And I think that's why sex positive panels, talks, everything that I do is completely biased into normalizing women's sexuality. And that's one of the reasons why.
But I just want to say, this is the first time there's been a pleasure panel at the International Family Planning Conference. And let's make sure it's not the last time. So we've opened up an amazing space here, and like our panelists have said, take this, start having conversations, broaden this out. This needs to be normalized, these types of conversations. So I would like to thank all of our panelists today. Really, you're amazing. Please connect with them after this conference.